There is a photograph from the 1890s that is hard to look at twice. A man stands on top of a hill. The hill is not made of earth, it is made of buffalo skulls, thousands of them, stacked higher than a house, waiting to be ground into fertilizer. Every skull in that photograph was once part of a living animal on the American plains, and almost every one of them died in a single human lifetime. You have probably seen that image before, but you were never told the whole story, because the story is not just about what was destroyed, it is about what was ignored. The people who lived with the buffalo for thousands of years understood something about that animal that the men on the skull pile never asked. And the strangest part? Science is only now catching up to what they knew. Start with the number, 30 million. Some estimates run higher, toward 60 million, but 30 is the careful one. That is how many buffalo are believed to have roamed North America at their peak, herds so large that travelers wrote about waiting days for a single herd to pass. The ground shook, the horizon moved, it was the largest gathering of big land animals anywhere on Earth. Now hold the second number next to it. By the late 1880s, when the naturalist William Temple Hornaday went out to count what was left, he could document only a few hundred wild buffalo in the entire United States. Fewer than 1,000 animals, wild and captive combined, survived on the whole continent by some counts. 30 million to nearly none, not over centuries, over roughly 20 years of industrial scale killing. How does that even happen? The short answer is that it was profitable, and then it was policy. In the 1870s, a new tanning process made buffalo hides valuable for machine belts and leather goods. The railroads had just cut the great herd in two, and they could ship hides east by the ton. Commercial hunters swept the plains, taking the hide and the tongue and leaving everything else to rot in the sun. Travelers described plains littered with carcasses as far as they could see, and the killing had a second purpose that officials of the era did not hide. The buffalo fed and clothed and sheltered the plains nations. Destroy the herds and you destroy the independence of the people who depended on them. Some military officers said so openly. The animal was not just harvested, it was targeted. Now stop and ask the question almost nobody asked at the time. The Lakota, the Blackfeet, the Comanche, the Cheyenne, and dozens of other nations had lived with these herds for thousands of years. They hunted buffalo constantly, they ate buffalo, wore buffalo, slept under buffalo hides, made tools from buffalo bone and glue from buffalo hooves. Thousands of years of continuous hunting, and the herds numbered 30 million. 20 years of the other approach and the herds were gone. Same animal, same grass, same plains. What was different? The difference was the relationship. To the hide hunters, the buffalo was a resource, a thing, a unit of profit standing conveniently still. To the Plains nations, the buffalo was something closer to a relative. Many Plains peoples speak of the Buffalo Nation, a people alongside their own, deserving of respect and gratitude. That is not decoration. It is a working principle with teeth. Because here is what it produces in practice. You do not take everything from a relative, you do not waste what a relative gives you, and you do not destroy the thing your grandchildren's lives will depend on. That worldview showed up as method: take what is needed, use what is taken. Historians and elders alike describe the fullness of it: meat for food, fresh and dried into pemmican that kept for years, hides for tippies, robes and shields, sinew for thread and bowstrings, bones for tools and runners for sleds, horns for spoons and cups, even the tail could serve as a fly swatter. The animal was honored by the completeness of its use. Waste was not just impractical, it was disrespectful. Compare that to a hide man taking one skin and a tongue and leaving 1,000 pounds of relative rotting on the grass. But the deeper knowledge was ecological, and this is where the story turns. The Plains nations understood the buffalo as something science now calls a keystone species, an animal the entire system leans on. The herds did not just live on the prairie, they built it. Their grazing kept the grasses in constant renewal, the way a mowed lawn grows back thicker. Their hooves broke the soil crust and pressed seeds into the ground. Their wallows, those dusty bowls they rolled in, collected rainwater and became small worlds for birds, insects, and amphibians. Their droppings fed the soil. Where the buffalo moved, life followed. Ecologists studying prairie restoration today keep arriving at the same finding. Bring back the bison, and the grassland comes back with it. Plant diversity rises, birds return. The nations that followed the herds were not wandering. They were participating in that system. Moving with the animals meant no place was ever grazed bare, no river camp fouled beyond recovery, no single valley pushed past what it could bear. The knowledge was precise and it was old. Some Plains peoples used managed drives and carefully maintained hunting grounds for thousands of years, burning sections of prairie so fresh green growth would draw the herds where they were needed. That is not primitive survival. That is landscape management on a continental scale, run on a timescale our institutions cannot even imagine. And it was ignored, worse than ignored, it was dismissed as the superstition of people who supposedly did not know how to use the land properly. The men who said that then killed 30 million animals in 20 years and turned the plains into a boneyard. Within a few more decades, the plowed-up grasslands blew away in the Dust Bowl, one of the worst ecological disasters in American history. The people who called the old knowledge primitive had removed the Keystone and were standing in the rubble asking what happened. Here's where you come into this story. Because you live inside the same choice every day, whether you notice it or not. Every system you depend on, your food, your water, your work, your family, offers you the same two relationships the buffalo offered: resource or relative. Take everything now, or take what is needed and keep the source alive. The hide hunter's logic did not die in the 1880s. It runs quietly in how forests are cut, how fisheries are emptied, how topsoil is spent, how attention is strip-mined by the glowing thing in your pocket. It is always the same trade: empty the future to inflate the present, and the old knowledge did not die either. That is the part of this story you rarely hear. The buffalo survived barely because a handful of people, including native families who hid and protected small herds, refused to let the animal vanish. From those few hundred survivors, the recovery began. Today, there are hundreds of thousands of bison in North America. In 2016, the bison was named the national mammal of the United States, and leading much of the return are the nations who never forgot the relationship. The Intertribal Buffalo Council, a coalition of dozens of tribes, has spent decades restoring herds to tribal lands, not as livestock but as relatives coming home. Yellowstone bison, descendants of one of the last wild remnants, are transferred to tribal nations to seed new herds. Where those herds walk, the prairie is stitching itself back together, wallow by wallow, exactly as the old knowledge said it would. Think about what that means. The worldview that was dismissed as superstition turned out to be the accurate ecological model. The worldview that called itself rational and scientific destroyed its own resource base in 20 years. If you had to choose which one deserves the word wisdom, the skull pile has already answered for you. So, take the test that the buffalo puts to everyone. Look at something you depend on: your health, your marriage, your land if you have some, your customers if you have a business. Now ask the hide hunter's question: how much can I take from this right now? Feel how that question hollows things out. Then ask the other question, the one the Plains nations asked for thousands of years. What does this relationship need from me so that it keeps giving for generations? Different question, different behavior, different future. One question built a skull pile. The other sustained 30 million buffalo and the people who lived alongside them, in balance, for longer than most civilizations have existed. The herds are coming back now, slowly, hoofbeat by hoofbeat. The grass remembers them. The knowledge that kept them alive for millennia is still here, carried by the nations that never let go of it, finally being heard by the scientists who once talked over it. That photograph of the Skull Hill still exists. It is worth looking at one more time, with new eyes, not as a picture of what happened to an animal, as a picture of what happens whenever the question is wrong. Every skull on that hill is the answer to how much can I take right now, and every buffalo walking the plains today is the answer to the older question, the one that was there all along, waiting for the rest of the world to finally ask it.